The sonar ping echoed through the depths of the Mariana Trench, revealing something that shouldn't exist. Dr. Sarah Chen stared at her monitor aboard the research vessel Pathfinder, her hands trembling as she traced the impossible geometry on her screen. 11 kilometers below the surface, buried beneath centuries of sediment, lay a structure too perfect to be natural. "It's a ship," she whispered, though her team had already reached the same conclusion, but not one of ours. 3 weeks later, Sarah descended in the submersible Triton, her heart pounding as the lights cut through the absolute darkness. The vessel emerged from the gloom like a sleeping giant, its hull comprised of materials that seemed to drink in their searchlights. It was enormous, easily the size of an aircraft carrier, yet streamlined in ways human engineering had never conceived. The entry point her team had identified yawned open like a wound. Sarah guided the submersible inside, her breath fogging the viewport despite the climate control. The interior corridor stretched endlessly, walls inscribed with luminescent symbols that pulsed weakly, as if the ship itself were dreaming. Then she found the bridge, and everything humanity believed about itself shattered. The chamber was vast, designed for beings at least 3 meters tall. Control stations lined the walls, but it was the central holographic display that seized Sarah's attention. It flickered to life as she approached, responding to her presence with an eagerness that suggested it had been waiting. Images cascaded before her, star charts, biological schematics, and historical records spanning millennia. But these weren't records of the ship's creators. They were records of humanity. Sarah's knees weakened as she processed what she was seeing. The hologram showed Earth from space, then zoomed to various locations across time: ancient Mesopotamia, the construction of the pyramids, the Library of Alexandria, medieval Europe, the Industrial Revolution. Each era marked with the same symbol, repeated obsessively: a human handprint surrounded by stars. The ship's logs, automatically translated by systems far beyond human technology, told an impossible story. The vessel belonged to the HFY Collective, a coalition of 73 species that had dominated the galactic arm for over 50,000 years. They were explorers, conquerors, and evaluators of primitive worlds. Earth had been one of thousands on their list. 15,000 years ago, they had come to assess whether humanity posed a threat or offered value. What they found terrified them. The logs described human ancestors with clinical precision, but threaded through the analysis was something Sarah had never expected from an advanced alien race: fear. The HFY had studied humanity for decades, observing from orbit and sending reconnaissance teams. They documented human tribal warfare, tool use, and early agriculture. But it wasn't humanity's primitiveness that frightened them. It was humanity's potential. One entry, marked with what the translator called high priority warning, made Sarah's blood run cold. The species exhibits unprecedented adaptive aggression. They fight not just for survival, but for abstract concepts: honor, revenge, curiosity. They create art about death. They laugh in the face of extinction. In 12 observation cycles, they have advanced more rapidly than any recorded species at comparable development stage. Their neurology suggests capacity for both extreme violence and extreme compassion, often simultaneously. Psychological profile indicates they will not stop. Recommendation: immediate planetary sterilization. But the HFY hadn't sterilized Earth. The logs showed heated debate within the crew. Some argued for humanity's destruction. Others, including the ship's commander, argued for something else: isolation. Not because humanity was weak, but because they might become unstoppable. The final entries revealed the HFY's decision. They would place a quantum barrier around Earth's solar system, making it invisible and unreachable to the wider galaxy. Humanity would remain quarantined, allowed to develop in isolation. If they ever broke through the barrier, it would mean they had achieved technological supremacy that even the HFY couldn't prevent. At that point, the galaxy would have to accept humanity as equals, or prepare for war. The ship had been stationed on Earth as a monitoring post, deliberately sunk in the deepest part of the ocean where primitive humans couldn't reach it. For thousands of years it had watched and waited. Then, approximately 3,000 years ago, something catastrophic had happened to the HFY Collective. The logs went dark. The ship continued its vigil alone, its crew either dead or departed, maintaining the barrier through automated systems. Until 6 months ago, when human satellites had finally developed sensors sophisticated enough to detect inconsistencies in spacetime around the solar system, the barrier had been weakening, degraded by millennia without maintenance. Sarah realized with shocking clarity why the ship had opened for her, why it had shared these secrets. It was fulfilling its final directive. If humanity reached the ship, they deserved to know what awaited them beyond the failing barrier. They deserved to know that the galaxy had feared them since the dawn of civilization. The hologram shifted, showing one last image. A star map with hundreds of inhabited systems marked in cool blue, and a single question in bold pulsing text translated into English. Are you ready? Sarah thought about human history, the wars, the art, the science, the dreams of touching the stars. She thought about how humanity had clawed its way from caves to spacecraft, driven by insatiable curiosity and stubborn refusal to accept limits. The Kethri had been right to fear that combination. She pressed her hand against the holographic interface, her fingerprints aligning perfectly with the ancient symbol. The ship thrummed to life around her, systems awakening after millennia of sleep. Across the globe, every space agency's instruments went haywire as the quantum barrier dissolved like morning mist. For the first time in 15,000 years, humanity's light shone into the galaxy, and the galaxy, Sarah knew, would never be the same. She smiled, thinking of the Kethri's final question. Humanity had spent its entire existence getting ready for this moment. They had been caged, feared, and isolated. Now the cage was open. The question wasn't whether humanity was ready for the galaxy. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for humanity.